So this is how the Fox X-Men movies are gonna go out. Well, that sucks. Dark Phoenix is the last movie in the X-Men franchise that has spanned almost 20 years now. Or is it X-Men Dark Phoenix? All the promotional material removed the X-Men moniker from the title, but the beginning of the movie does say X-Men Dark Phoenix. Regardless though, movie is what it is. This is the second telling of the Dark Phoenix saga that we've had in this franchise alone. The first time being X-Men 3 The Last Stand, which for years has been heralded as one of the worst X-Men movies to date. And if you believe what everybody else says online, there's a new contender in town. This X-Men follows the First Class X-Men that we've been following since the soft reboot of X-Men First Class. It's the early 90s and the X-Men are heralded as superheroes of the world. They got action figures and cereals and comic books and just all the cool stuff that we saw mention of in the far superior Logan just a few years back. So for once, the world is not against the mutants. They're all for them. They're kind of like badass rock stars that everybody calls upon when there's a big disaster going on. We see as a result of that Professor X has become kind of consumed with vanity because of all of this. And while his intentions are good, because he's seen what can happen when the world is 100% against mutants, these good intentions lead him to some bad decisions that jeopardize the welfare of his team and everything that he stood for up to this point. In the beginning of the movie, there's a big space disaster that the X-Men get called upon by the President of the United States to go help bring their men back home, which they do. But in the process, Sophie Turner's Jean Grey gets caught in the path of some big solar flare energy thing out in space that she absorbs. It's all good though, because they get back, they save the day, and she feels great. Until she doesn't. This newfound energy she's consumed apparently starts breaking down some mental blocks that she has in her head that have been keeping some memories from her past repressed. That, coupled with this new power she has, becomes too much for her to handle, and whenever things get a bit difficult for her, she ends up losing her shit and blowing up and hurting a whole bunch of people around her. Well, not literally blowing up. She figuratively blows up and does hurt a lot of people around her. Either way, she's losing control and hurting people. A whole bunch of people get hurt. She runs away from the situation. Some new players are introduced that want this power that she has. Those players, the X-Men, and Magneto's Brotherhood all go try to find her. Some want to save her, some want to kill her, some want the power. Conveniently, they all happen to find her at the same time, same place each time this happens. There's some battles, people get hurt, allegiances change, there's a kick-ass train scene, and then the movie, and by proxy, the franchise, ends. This movie's not good. If you look online, people shit all over this movie and act as if it was the worst film released in the past 10 years. It's not that bad. Now, I'm not saying it's good either, because it's not. The X-Men franchise up to this point has been littered with absolutely great movies. And epically bad movies. The franchise as a whole has been extremely inconsistent. You never know what you're going to get when you walk into one of these movies. Unfortunately, with this one, you're walking into one of the bad ones. What makes it even more unfortunate is that this is the franchise's swan song. And it kind of sucks that a franchise that has such great roots as the original X-Men and X2 to go out on such a downer. Everybody from in front of the camera and mostly behind the camera is back from the past few films. This is usually a good sign, but here, not so much. The performances are just really dull and drab. And these are great actors all around. There is some legit AAA talent in this movie, but they all are just really dull. It seems as everybody here is just bored out of their mind and contractually obligated to be here. There's zero passion on screen. And since we do have so much great talent in front of and behind the camera that we've seen in this very same franchise make great movies, when trying to see what's wrong with this movie, I have to look at what's different this time around. And the one main difference between this movie and the ones that came before it is the director. This time around, we get first-time director Simon Kinberg. And while he may be a first-time director, this isn't his first time with the franchise. He is a long-time writer for the franchise and many other very popular, great movies in Hollywood. And while writing and producing may have been his thing, and he did a great job with this franchise to this point, taking over the director's chair was a big mistake here. This is one of the most soulless and boring X-Men movies I've ever seen. And yeah, I'm even including Wolverine Origins. While that movie wasn't great, it at least had a soul and some passion behind it. It wasn't executed very good, that's for damn sure, but you could tell that they were passionate about what they were doing at least. Here, there's none of that. They just seem bored out of their minds. And in turn, you the viewer are as well. The majority of the characters that you've come to know and love, with the exception of Wolverine, return this time around as well. However, their passion and enthusiasm for the series, they left that in the last movie. We also get a set of new characters that's headed up by Jessica Chastain. I don't really want to say who these characters are for fear of spoilers. Regardless if the movie's good or not, I don't want to spoil it for you. I will say about these characters, though, I didn't really care for them. Now, my knowledge of the X-Men comic books as a whole is fairly pedestrian, and I imagine that these characters probably do show up somewhere in the X-Men universe, or at least the Marvel universe as a whole. But as far as the X-Men movies up to this point, the universe that they've created, these characters seemed very out of place. What they are and how they come about in this story doesn't really fit the world that they've built for this X-Men franchise up to this point. I don't really care if they showed up in the comics or not. The world that they've built here, these characters just don't fit. And while they do play, I guess, a main part in the story, I feel like the story could have been reworked and they could have totally been taken out and you really wouldn't have noticed. Speaking of the story, it's honestly not that bad, really. Like, on paper, it's not that bad. The movie presents it in a really bad way, but on paper, the idea behind it and what more or less happens in it isn't terrible. We've seen a lot worse. But like everything else, the execution of that story is just really fucking boring, man. And regardless of how good the core of your story is, if it's executed in a really boring and dull way, that's kind of irredeemable. So that's a lot of bad so far about this movie. There's got to be something good about it, right? Yes, there is. From a technical standpoint, this movie's really good. Like, just the overall look, the way it's shot, and just how everything on screen looks is really nice. It's a pretty as hell movie. It's also a special effects heavy movie, and all the effects in this movie look amazing. Like, they spared no expense on the special effects here. They all look fantastic. The movie overall, just visually, what you see looks great. It's just really unfortunate that all that technical talent was put to waste in such a dull, drab, boring ass movie. If you've watched anything about this movie, I'm sure you've heard about the train scene and how great it is. Yeah, it is really good and is definitely the highlight of the movie. It's a really fun, entertaining, awesome 10-minute sequence that I had a great time with. But that 10-minute sequence absolutely in no way, shape, form, or fashion makes up for everything that came before it and the little bit that comes after it. It's not gonna fix this movie. If you want to see that sequence, go on YouTube and look it up. I'm sure you can watch the whole thing there. And honestly, as poorly as these characters are portrayed on screen, you'll have about the same emotional connection to these characters and the events unfolding on screen by doing that as you would if you watched the whole entire movie. You just wouldn't have to be bored for the hour and a half leading up to watching that scene. Guys, at the end of the day, what else can I say about this movie that hadn't already been said? It looks great, but it's boring as shit. And I really hate that this franchise that's been going on for almost 20 years is going out on such a sour note. But it is, and you know, we've always got the other movies that we can go back to and enjoy. But what you won't enjoy is this movie. And I can't recommend you really going to see this, buying it, or even spending any money whatsoever on it because it's just boring as hell and you'd be pissed off as hell at me if I told you to. And while it's not an absolute dumpster fire, it is pretty bad. And if you are just the most die-hard X-Men fan and just have to watch this movie, then don't waste too much of your time and just check this one out on USA Up All Night. This really sucks. I was hoping to come out of this and be able to tell everybody about how this movie wasn't nearly as bad as everybody was saying it was. And while how bad everybody has been saying it is, maybe inflated just a little bit, they're honestly not too far off. It's pretty bad, man. Especially considering the pedigree of the movies that preceded it. So there it is, guys, my review of Dark Phoenix. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
I lose control. Bad things happen.
This is definitely one of the, if not the, worst X-Men movies ever made. And yeah, that includes Origins. Honestly, I had more fun watching Origins, so that kind of makes this the worst one. Man, I didn't think I'd ever say that. Or at least I hoped I wouldn't.